Right, in this lesson we're going to visit a topic which is particularly apt. The topic is remote working, and it's in the graphic communications course, and it's apt because the pandemic has forced us, you and me, into the situation of remote working. But we have to look at this through the lens of graphic communications and try and figure out what is meant by remote working. So, remote working has come about because graphic communication technologies have had an impact on how people work. Illustrators and designers and graphic artists inevitably these days spend quite a lot of their working time sitting in front of a powerful computer. But what do we mean by remote working? Well, this technology, this fact that we are now bound to computers and telephones and things like that, has allowed people to work in their own homes. So it's allowed people to work apart from perhaps the rest of their colleagues or their clients or the studio that employs them. In other words, remote working is the opposite to everybody being in the one office, all working together. And how has graphic tech allowed this? That's one of the questions that bubbles up. And is remote working any good? What are the benefits, say, to the worker or to the employer? Well, the sort of graphic technology that allowed this is basically the internet. The internet came along, and on top of the internet we had things such as email and instant messenger and applications such as Teams and Zoom and things like that, which allow people to communicate across vast distances cheaply. You could always do it with phones, but it was expensive. But the internet came along and it's now inexpensive for me to share video or my voice with people on the other side of the world. Also the fact that quite a lot of graphics technology has become computer based. So illustration packages, desktop publishing, 3D CAD, all these things exist inside a computer, and therefore they're files, and the output that you make exists inside a computer. That's why we can send 3D models here and PDFs there. So the internet and the communications network has basically been the sort of technology that's allowed this. But there's other things as well. There's emerging technologies such as 3D printing and rapid prototyping, which allows me to have super fast prototypes of things that I design on 3D CAD. Or digital printing, which allows me to get like super fast full colour proofs of the things that I intend to send to print. And does remote working have any drawbacks? Okay, so we're interested to know what the benefits are and what the drawbacks are as well. So let's take a look at them. So the benefits and drawbacks, the advantages and the disadvantages of working remotely. Let's take a look at the good side first of all, the benefits. Some of these benefits apply to the workers and some of them apply to the employers. But essentially when you're working from home, you can set your own hours and therefore you can enjoy some flexibility. You can decide when you work and when you take time off. One of the other benefits is that there's no commuting involved at all. So we no longer have to get in the train or the bus or drive a car to get to our place of work. So the roads in theory become quieter and they become safer as well. When we're working remotely, there are no office distractions. Offices are busy, bustling places. There's a lot of interpersonal relationships, there's friendships form, and there's a lot of chit chat and things like that. And when we're working remotely, there are none of those office distractions. We're no longer tempted to go and visit a friend at the other side of the office. So it's argued that in remote working situations, people can become more productive. They can get more done. Remote working also allows us to work across different time zones as well. If I was an employer and I really needed a particular artist or an illustrator from Argentina, then the fact that that Argentinian is working remotely means that he or she can interact with me and we can get work done as well. So we can work across time zones. And ultimately, if I'm the employer and I've got a team of people who are all working from home, then it's going to save me money because I no longer have to hire a big office. I no longer have to pay for all their coffee and tea and their lights on and the heating and all that kind of stuff. So in theory, the employer can save a bit of money with remote working. Sounds rosy so far, but there are drawbacks, and you'll know this because you have been remote working because of this plague. Okay, so let's look at the drawbacks. Human to human teamwork suffers. When you're in an office with people or a studio or in a workplace like that, there's a camaraderie. involved. There's a rapport, and you build up friendships and rapport with people, and thus that all goes together to make collaboration really, really easy. So it's dead easy for you and someone else to work on something and to share ideas. When you're working remotely, you can't do that as easily. One of the other drawbacks with remote working is that it requires technology to do. It requires a really good internet connection, and it probably also needs some good IT support as well. Somebody needs to be on hand to fix everybody's problems that they're having with their home internet and their home computers and things like that. The third drawback is that there can be data security problems. Companies place a lot of value onto the data they have, the CAD files that they own, their personal records of their staff, how much money people make, how much money they pay out on accounts, and things like that. As soon as you start working remotely and you start sending that to people's houses and people's laptops, then that data becomes insecure. It's easily lost or deleted or leaked. Here's the big one for me, as someone who did remote working before this and before I was a teacher. The remote working experience can be isolating and lonely. Not for everybody. Some people thrive on that kind of peace and quiet, but some people find the lack of human-to-human contact lonely and isolating. So that's one of the drawbacks. And finally, what I'd like to say is that in-person tasks cannot be performed that well. What do I mean by that? Well, you and I can be collaborating remotely on stuff. We can be talking about graphic design, and we can be swapping Illustrator files and desktop publishing files and all that, and quite happily talking about it. But some tasks, particularly some conversations that are sensitive, or if you have to give a colleague bad news, or you have to have a discussion about discipline or something like that, those sorts of tasks where you really need to be face to face with someone is not very easy to do over remote working. So there we go, a list of benefits and drawbacks. The pandemic has forced you to be remote working. You may agree with some of this, or you may disagree with some of it. You may even have some thoughts that are not on this slide. So I want to give you an activity now. Let's take a look at this activity. I want you to design me a promotional poster. In fact, I want you to design 2 promotional posters. One poster should attempt to persuade me to try remote working. So one poster has to be all about how great remote working is, but the other poster must dissuade me from trying remote working. You must try and convince me that it's a bad idea. So we've got 2 posters going on here. You must make full use of the design principles and colour theory. You guys are 4th year graphic communications students. So we're not just going to throw any poster together willy-nilly. We're going to think carefully about what's going to dominate, how we're going to achieve unity, how we're going to make use of harmonious contrasts and colours, etc, etc. After you do me the 2 posters, you're going to write a short report for each of them, which describes and justifies the design principles and the aspects of colour theory that you have used. So we're going to plan the posters, we're going to make the posters, and we're going to write about the posters. Let's read on. There's some more instructions here. So number 1, you're going to plan the 2 posters with preliminary thumbnail graphics. In other words, you're going to produce a series of annotated thumbnails. We've done this before. Thumbnails are quick and they're loose, and they allow you to play around with layouts and ideas. Use annotations. Indicate where you will be applying design principles and colour theory. Instruction number 2, I want you to go online. Like we did before, I want you to use Canva to create 2 promotional A4 posters from your thumbnails. So look at the range of thumbnails that you've come up with. Remember, it's a designer's job to come up with lots and lots of different ideas. Look at them all, pick the 2 best ones, and take them forward and make me 2 promotional A4 posters. Remember, one of them is trying to tell me how great remote working is, and the other one's going to tell me the drawbacks of remote working. It's going to try and dissuade me from doing remote working. Finally, for each promotional poster, write a short report which describes and justifies your use of design principles and colour theory. When I say a short report, I really do mean a short report, a paragraph or 2, right? Not much for each poster. Right, before you go and do that, I want to talk a little bit about posters. First of all, posters have got to do two things. You've got to notice them and you've got to remember them. You don't necessarily have to read them. All right, this is an interesting insight I'm going to give you about posters. They must be eye-catching and memorable, and they must also be very easy to read quickly, because posters are normally viewed by people who are passing by. Right? These are not people who stand in front of a poster and read it top to bottom. It's almost like it wants to just grab your eye and get its message across super quickly. So you're going to have to use design principles to make sure that the reader sees, reads and remembers the poster's message. You can use images from the internet. Let's take a look at what I mean by this. Okay, so this is our design principles slides right here, and on these were lots of examples of really great posters. Let's look at some of them. Let's look at this one right here. So a poster's usually only trying to do two things, or the designer is usually trying to get you to notice two things. Notice something first, notice something second. From time to time there may be a third thing in there, but that's it, okay? Notice something first, second and third. You look at that poster right there, and they've kept their words to a minimum. Words are always kept to a minimum on posters. Words are kept to a minimum, and the graphic of the woman is doing all the work here. The graphic of the woman is enticing, it's triumphant, it's optimistic. There are planes in the background coming from factories, so the designer has been very clever and put a lot of his or her message in the drawings, and thus minimising the amount of words that we use. Let's look at some more things here. Innsbruck 76, Winter Olympics. That's all it was trying to say. Okay, so the designer again has said, notice the skier first. The skier's going to grab your eye, it's dominating. What's this skier all about? Aha, the second thing I'm going to notice is the fact that it's Innsbruck 76. Alright, so again, only a couple of things are trying to be achieved with posters. With film posters, it tends to be the name of the film, the name of the movie getting used there. Let's see if we can find any other ones. So poster design is all about grabbing attention and very quickly getting a super simple message across. So what does that mean for you? Well, what I don't want to see is I don't want to see these words and benefits just copied and pasted into the poster. Alright, there's too many words on these slides for a poster. You're going to have to simplify it. You're going to have to pick images and pick few words in order to get this message across. It's difficult, right? This is the essence of graphic design. It's really difficult to do this. So there are too many words on this screen already. Simplify it, pick only a few phrases and work with them. Remember your design principles. Something has to dominate. Use alignment for readability, and use unity so that the poster looks as though it all belongs together. And there are other tricks as well. Depth to create visual interest, line to lead the eye, and contrast. Contrast is important. Contrast grabs the viewer's attention immediately. And that's it. Good luck.